Hello and welcome back to F1 Analyzes. Today I have Eric Gruber, my brother,
Hello.
and we're going to be talking about Alpine. First thing is, when did you start watching F1, if you do at all?
I started paying attention to F1 3-ish years ago when you and Sam got into it.
Yeah.
And I was probably, 6 months, a year behind you guys
Mm-hmm.
in starting to follow it. And I'd say I check in, once a month and I have an idea of what the Constructors' Cup standings look like, but I don't watch every race. I'd maybe catch two or three a year.
Okay. That's a good amount. Yeah. Who is your favorite team or driver? Or both?
I like Ferrari a lot. I like
Okay.
Ferrari and I like Mercedes because you like Mercedes.
I do like Mercedes.
I think you've got me on the Toto Wolff hype train.
Let's go.
I like him because he's like not an F1 guy. He's just like a business
No, he's a
dude.
business dude.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I like him a lot. I think he runs a good team.
I agree. Who is your least favorite team?
My least favorite team is Alpine,
Perfect. Is
and that
there?
is that is because we talked about this briefly yesterday. But that's because
Yeah.
my least favorite football team is the Chiefs, maybe the Steelers,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly the Chiefs. And I really don't like Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce, and they're
Right.
both personally invested in Alpine, so I would love to see them lose their money.
That's crazy. And then, do you have a least favorite driver?
I'm a little annoyed by Verstappen just because he always wins, but like I,
That's
I wouldn't
fair.
say I dislike him as a person or anything. There's no
Right.
driver I've really disliked much, but I wouldn't mind seeing Verstappen
Stop winning.
take a step back. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna talk about Alpine's history. It started where it was this guy, Gene. I cannot pronounce his name.
Redele.
Redelay, yes, I think so actually. Gene Redelay made like the Alpine team because he was a business guy and he was a car dealer and he decided to create his own like car and then enter into races and stuff. And he did that and one of his first ever races was in the Alps and that's why it's called Alpine.
Oh,
Yeah.
very cool.
And then to get into more intense like racing and like better I guess environments for it, he partnered up with Renault and got engines from them to be able to join F1. So that's why it was called Renault because Renault was basically who
What kind?
supplied the engines and was the main they I think they bought 70% of Alpine and that was why they were like the main sponsor, main title team.
What races was Alpine doing before they got into F1?
I know they did some Formula 3 stuff and I think they were probably doing like the European championship.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume. That's typically where people will start out. That's what I've learned. So Renault's engines were interesting because they were what's called turbocharged, and that was like a very innovative thing. And it allowed them to be super quick, but they also had problems where like the engines were exploding.
Okay.
So they were pretty inconsistent. But eventually they were able to kind of tone down the explosion part and just be quick.
Mm-hmm.
And then all the other teams started doing turbocharged engines as well. So that was like in the 70s.
Okay.
All of what I just said. It was like 1972, I think, when they joined F1 or around then.
They joined as Renault, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
They joined as Renault. And then they left and Renault just made engines for people. And there was this team called Enstone. And in 2003, Renault rejoined F1 and took over the Enstone team. They did pretty well, like right off the bat doing that. Because they already had the foundations of a team and they were a good engine supplier. So in 2004 and 2005, they won the World Championship, with Fernando Alonso,
Right.
who still drives today.
In F1?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Who's he drive for?
He drives for Aston Martin now.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's not as good now.
No, he's
Is
not
that
as
like,
good now.
is it like an age thing? Like as you get older as a driver, you get worse like in other sports?
Yes, because you have slower reaction times, and that's like a huge thing.
Gotcha.
And also just different. I feel like it's like a thing with like different priorities too. Like you get older and you start like they start getting married, having kids, and suddenly they're like, oh, I can't die on track.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like Fernando Alonso's 42,
Mm-hmm.
and he still does well. He's very experienced, but I just think he's not as quick, and he doesn't have the same drive that he might have used to have.
Ha.
In 2012, Renault sold Enstone to Red Bull, and Red Bull kind of took over. In 2016, Renault purchased Enstone back from them
Interesting.
and took over again.
That's actually strange.
Yeah, it was very bizarre. They weren't overly successful, and they sort of were failing, is the nicest way to put it. They just were not doing well. And then they got back into partnership with Alpine again in 2021. And then Alpine became the main sort of manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's now called Alpine again. It's always been a French team, but it's based in England.
Right. That was some of the stuff that I was reading.
Yeah.
Was they're having problems with communication between their team in France and their team in England. And they're
Right.
looking to maybe consolidate and stop making engines. It was just like an article and the guy was speculating, but that guy said, you know, if you put a gun to my head and had to say who I thought they get their engines from, it would probably be Mercedes. Who else would be a contender?
Ferrari. Ferrari makes engines. I don't know. You could get like an outside source. Like Red Bull has Honda engines,
Okay.
but that's changing. Red Bull's gonna have Ford engines
Mm-hmm.
in 2026. So
That's what I saw too. This was all for 2026. So the next year's already set.
yeah, it's all just already set until 2026. 2026 is like a lot is happening. There's gonna be a bunch of regulation changes as well. So it'll definitely be interesting. The whole point is to try to make it more competitive. So I'm hoping that happens.
Yeah.
But we'll see. They did the same thing with like which is something that you wanted to talk about with the budget cap.
Mm-hmm.
They incorporated that in 2021, I want to say. Yeah, 2021, the budget cap was 145 million, and then they reduced that to 140 million during 2022, and now it's at 135.
What is that budget exactly?
So the budget includes like building the car, like employee salaries, driver salaries, transportation, marketing, and it's basically everything. Like food for the paddock, like
Okay. And who's at the budget cap? Who are the biggest spenders? Like, is every team at the budget cap? Does every team hit 135, or is it like some teams are spending $50 million, some are spending
I
135?
doubt every team hits 135. I can't imagine teams like Haas are doing that, or Williams right now.
Mm-hmm.
Versus the teams that do that are Mercedes, Ferrari, Red Bull, definitely.
Right.
Like Red Bull exceeded the budget cap last year.
I saw something about that.
Mm-hmm.
They got penalties for it?
They got, what did they get? They got reduced wind tunnel time and a fine of $6
Okay.
million.
So you can go over. I was saying it reminds me of baseball a lot, where in baseball you have a salary cap, but there's something called the luxury tax where you can go over the salary cap, but you just have to pay, you know, a fine pretty much. So there's teams in baseball every year, like one or two teams, the Dodgers and the Yankees usually, that'll go over the salary cap. I'm a fan of a small market team, the Orioles, so I'm not a fan of how that all works. And
Right.
I like when teams are all spending pretty much the same amount of money, which like the NFL, pretty much every team spends the same budget every year.
I mean, it used to be insane in F1 where teams like Mercedes were spending like 400 million.
Mhm.
And then you had teams like Haas that were like 50 million.
Yeah.
It's a huge, huge difference. It's definitely changed. It's made it more competitive, but it could be even more competitive. You know, like you still have Max Verstappen just dominating. In the past few weeks, it's become a little bit more entertaining, where some other teams are slowly starting to catch up, and you don't fully know that Max is going to win just going into it, which I like.
I read some stuff about, I can't remember the exact teams, maybe Mercedes and Ferrari making in-season adjustments to their cars that have been paying off.
Yeah, a lot of teams do like mid-season upgrades where they'll incorporate new designs and things like that and test them out. And I mean, sometimes it does not pay off, but Mercedes and Ferrari have had things that have really paid off. And so has McLaren. McLaren had a great upgrade for Miami.
And Red Bull hasn't done an upgrade yet?
Not anything too like notable.
Uh-huh.
They have done upgrades, but nothing major. And I think I heard Max talking about how that's sort of like their downfall right now, where they have so much going on internally that they're not being like able to focus on the car and stuff.
Right. I like this sport a lot, and I don't love it as much as you do, but just like from the casual fan perspective, I mean, if these races where they're going into it, there were 8 drivers that could win it every week pretty much, like that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Because I feel like right now it's like Max has a chance every week. The top, 3 guys in pole position have a chance, and that's kind of like it.
Yeah. And I don't even know if there have definitely been times where it was sort of up in the air who could win, but I don't think it's ever been like that insane where you're
Right.
like anyone could win it unless
Right.
it's like raining during the races.
Mm-hmm.
Then it's a free for all.
So it's historically been a sport that's dominated by like a dynasty, like a
Yes.
team that'll take over, for 3, 7 years.
Yeah, I mean, even thinking about like the name. If you think about the name Ferrari, like you know that as a racing team,
Right.
and you know that as like a winning racing team, and I mean, that goes into like Le Mans as well, but that's also F1, where like they've just dominated, at least in past years. And you have, yeah, it's very difficult to create a new team in F1.
I did see things that they were looking to possibly add an 11th team.
I think they declined it.
Yeah. Yeah, they rejected his bid for an 11th team in 2025.
Yeah. Which 2025 is great. Like, you gotta put in for like 2028.
Has it always been 10 teams?
No. There have been times where it's been more.
Oh.
Yeah.
Has it been less ever?
I bet when they first started, probably. But also, I think when they first started, they had more cars. Like, teams didn't have a 2-car limit.
Mm-hmm. I saw something too that was talking about how Mercedes started selling Mercedes AMG cars. Have you heard of those?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like a whole brand, and they're supposed to be like kind of like sport mode, like racing, high performance, fast,
Yeah.
well handling cars that have like some components of the racing stuff in them. And apparently they've been like killing it, and Mercedes is bringing in all this revenue because of it. And they were saying, we should start seeing other companies, Ferrari and things like that, start building out this almost F1 brand, like racing
I mean,
sport brand.
you just said that, and now I want to buy that car.
Yeah.
Like, something I've never understood though is why companies do that, or why they even have like sports mode, because speeding's illegal. Like, they're basically saying like just don't get caught.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's so weird that they have that. Even just like you can see on the speedometer of cars, like mine goes up to 140.
Yeah.
Like you can't do that literally anywhere.
Yeah.
Why is it even a possibility?
And like Ferraris and stuff, yeah, they'll go up to like 200 on
Yeah.
the dash thing.
What's the point of that?
I don't know.
Okay, there's this guy Otmar who used to be the team principal of. Well, he was the team principal of Racing Point, and then he was the team principal of Aston Martin. And then in 2021, he moved to be the team principal of Alpine. And I did not like him at all. He was mainly why I didn't like Alpine.
Yeah.
He just like annoyed me. He just would complain and then he wouldn't ever do anything to fix it. And he was just annoying. Like he would just call out other teams for things, but then he wouldn't be like working on his own team.
Where is he now?
He was fired in 2022.
For what?
Just sucking.
Yeah, what you just said, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there was the whole situation with Alpine and Oscar Piastri. It was announced from Alpine that Oscar signed with Alpine,
Hmm.
and then Oscar said on Twitter, like, that's not true. And then Oscar signed with McLaren.
Really? When
Yeah,
was this?
that was in 2022,
Hmm.
like the summer of 2022. And
Okay.
then he joined McLaren in 2023.
That's actually perfect you just said that because that's something I wanted to ask too. What is like a usual contract length for a driver? And what do they usually make? I don't really have an idea of what their contracts and stuff look like. Is it usually like 1 year, 2 year, three, like 10 year? Like, does it
Um,
change?
1 to 2 years is a typical contract length. If it's anything more than that, that's kind of impressive.
Okay.
You have like, I think Lando is signed with McLaren until like 2028 or something like that. And so I think maybe Charles is as well with Ferrari.
What's Max's contract like?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Max until 2028. But
Okay.
you also have like exit clauses typically in contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's possible that they leave, but that's doesn't often happen.
Can you look up highest paid drivers? I want to see like what their salaries are.
Yeah, I assume it's per year. So 70 million for Verstappen,
Wow.
45
You're taking
for
like
Hamilton.
pretty much
That's
double,
crazy.
more than double everyone except Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So they usually make around like look 20 to 30 million. It looks like for like a decent driver.
Yeah, it's also dependent, I think, on how well they do in the races. Like they get paid per race and things
Right.
like that.
Like based on where they finish, they get
Yeah.
bonuses and things. That makes
Yeah.
sense. Look up what the average MLB player makes. 5 million.
5 million.
Okay.
Oh, geez, that's crazy. That's a big
So these
difference.
so these guys get paid more. I'd say a little more than like on average. These guys get paid more than the big American sports like NFL, NBA,
Yeah.
MLB.
So the two drivers for Alpine are Pierre Gasly.
Give me the feeling. Okay, I remember I told my parents I want to be like this guy on TV and like just spraying champagne every weekend because he was winning almost all the races. And
Pierre Gasly is French. He joined F1 in 2017 with Toro Rosso, and he moved to Red Bull in 2018. And then very quickly, Red Bull kicked him out because that's what Red Bull does. And he went back to, then it was called AlphaTauri in 2019, and then he moved to Alpine in 2023.
Okay.
He's okay. He doesn't have anything too notable. I think he's won a few races, but he's really not talked about much, especially now because Alpine has been doing horribly.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't even off the top of my head think of much like about him or his career. In 2019, there was this guy, Antoine Hubert, who was a Formula 2 driver, and he was very, very close with Gasly. Like, they grew up together.
Mm-hmm.
And during the Spa Grand Prix, during the second lap of the race, he got into a crash with someone else, and he passed away.
Wow.
So I know that every year, Gasly, during the Spa race, will go to like the spot where his friend died and leave flowers there. And every year there's a picture of him like kneeling by it.
That's so sad.
It's so sad every single time.
Wow.
Like every single time I see it, it makes me cry.
Was that before they had the Halo?
No, the Halo was incorporated in 2018. I guess I don't know. I don't really know what the crash was like.
What was the last F1 death?
Was probably Jules Bianchi in 26. No, that's in 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. This was probably the most recent, at least that I can think of, like motorsport
Mm-hmm.
death. Pierre also grew up with Esteban Ocon, who's the other Alpine driver. I hate Esteban Ocon. I shouldn't
What?
say hate. I don't hate him. There's no reason for me to. I just don't like him. I don't like his vibe. I think he's kind of rude.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. He just like gets on my nerves. I can't really explain it.
So you're not much of a fan of Alpine.
I'm not a fan of Alpine. Alpine's my least favorite team.
Really? Let's
Yeah.
go.
I just think that they're poorly run.
Hmm.
I don't know. And they just annoy me. Yeah. So Esteban, it's like a known thing that a lot of the drivers don't get along with him.
Edit out these mammoth yawns.
Especially, it was a huge, huge thing where Esteban and Pierre like were close growing up because they grew up together. And then I guess Pierre beat Esteban during one of their like karting matches, and then they had this huge rivalry occur.
Hmm.
And they just like did not get along. And there've been like they had a Drive to Survive episode about it where like, Pierre was talking about how like reaching out to him and like trying to like rekindle their relationship, and Esteban was just like, nah.
Hmm.
So I also don't like him because of that. Because like I don't know,
He just
they
doesn't
have
seem
a
like a great
fine.
guy.
Yeah, he just doesn't seem like he seems like racing gets in the way of some of his relationships, I guess, which makes sense. But
Yeah.
also I don't know. But he has like him and Pierre get along fine, at Alpine since they're teammates now. It's not like an issue for the team, I don't think.
Hmm.
But and they definitely respect each other. But it's just weird, like having those two that grew up together that then like didn't like each other being on the same team now.
Yeah, I kind of love that actually.
Yeah.
That makes me more interested in Alpine.
It's definitely that's a pretty common thing where I mean the drivers basically all grew up together and they have like these little rivalries and stuff.
Right.
There was one with like Max and Charles.
Yeah, because they've been racing what on like F3 and F2 against each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They've been I mean even all the way back to karting days, like 8 years old racing against each other.
Yeah.
Because it's such a small like
Right.
group of people,
Yeah.
It's like people like doing sports in Maryland even where like everyone who does the same sports as
I think
you.
lacrosse is a good example of
Yes.
that, especially because like the Northeast is very big in like we knew all like the good lacrosse players just from going to like tournaments, summer tournaments, and things
Yeah.
like that. Like even kids
Exactly.
that lived in like Long Island and things, they're really good. Like
Yeah.
you kind of knew who they were.
Exactly. So there was a weird incident in 2018 where Esteban and Max like got into a crash or something, and afterwards Max went up to Esteban, I don't angrily, obviously, and I don't know what was said, but Max ended up like physically like pushing Esteban
Wow.
and then walking away. So I just think that was interesting. And then in an interview when Max was like asked what had happened, Max was like,
I don't really have a lot to comment on that, except that he was being a pussy.
That's what he
that.
said.
Yeah.
There's a lot of drama in F1.
There's
a lot of like
so much drama in
calling each other
F1.
out. Yeah.
Oh yeah. They don't like I don't know who's running their PR teams, but they really don't hold back, especially in the older days.
That's like not like other sports though, because like
I
could you
know.
imagine if like I don't know, like the Ravens like lost to the Chiefs this year in the playoffs, and like Lamar Jackson after the game was like, Patrick Mahomes is such a pussy, man. Fuck that guy. In the post, like he would be crucified. He would be kicked out of the league pretty much.
Oh
Like,
no, yeah.
there's so much like training and limitation around what you can say. I wish it was more like that, where the guys could actually say what they wanted.
It's not even like they can say what they want to. It's just they always choose to.
And they get
A good
fined for it.
example, I probably sometimes, but I don't even know if they have that, honestly. I'm sure they do to some extent. But like they don't like I my best example is during the whatever race was after Monaco this year. I can't remember what it was. Charles had a DNF,
Hmm.
and afterwards he like went to be interviewed because they have to, and a PR manager, I guess, like went up to him and like showed him a phone of like what to say or whatever, and he just went, "I'll say what I want," and turned to the interviewer.
Changing the pew, yeah, okay. It's okay. I'll say what I want.
That's great.
It's
That's
just
great.
funny.
It just makes it better for the fans too. Like you just have
Yeah.
more to, it's more interesting.
Yeah. And the other weird thing about Esteban is, and this is like 20 times weirder being that I don't like Esteban. Toto Wolff is his manager.
Like his personal manager.
Yeah.
That is actually so strange.
Yeah.
Like that like shouldn't be allowed almost.
No, I know. So
Wait, so like his agent?
I mean, sort
Like
of,
he like
yeah.
negotiates his contracts?
Yes.
That's so weird.
Yeah. He used to be a Mercedes driver,
Mm-hmm.
and then he was on the Minardi team, and then he was Mercedes reserve driver, and now he's at Alpine.
That's like I just keep relating it back to like American sports and other sports, and it's just
It's
like
just
incomprehensible the fact that like yeah, like
right? Like that doesn't I remember when I first learned that, I had to take a solid few days to be like, I don't understand.
yeah,
Like that shouldn't how is that a thing?
it'd be like John Harbaugh, the coach of the Ravens, is like some guy's agent who plays on like the Bears.
Yeah.
Like
Not only
it's such a
that,
conflict of interest. It feels
I
like
know, right? Not only that, but then you have like honestly, I mean, this is not to get too much into this because the next episode I'm doing is Mercedes, but Toto Wolff is just an insane person. He's not only is he the team principal of Mercedes, he's also the CEO and he's Esteban's manager.
yeah, just
Like
does it all.
what is he I don't even know. And his wife is on the FIA.
Wow, that's another huge conflict of interest.
Yeah, they actually had an incident at the beginning of this season where there was like a report. They were doing an investigation on the Wolves because they thought that there was something like going on, but it was very quickly cleared. She used to be like a driver. She's one of the only women who's driven an F1 car.
That's cool.
Yeah, she's great. I really like her. She honestly is like who first got me into F1.
Yeah,
Because I was like, the sport's stupid, and then she popped up, and I was like, yes, let's go.
he was racing recently,
Um,
or you just saw old clips of it.
I just saw old clips, or I don't know what I was doing. I think I was looking into Mercedes team because I saw like a Drive to Survive episode about them. And I think I was also just looking into like the women in F1 and if there are any, and she came up. She runs the women's. She's like the overseer of F1 Academy, which is like the women's F1.
Right, and this, yeah, I heard you talking about that on one of your other podcasts. That you were saying you don't think that many women will actually break into F1
I don't,
because
especially
of that.
yeah. I don't think. I mean, I don't think they honestly had much of a chance overall in general, but I do think that this limits it because like people will just push them there.
Yeah, it is though a sport that like it shouldn't. Like there shouldn't be a barrier for women. You know what I mean? Like if you can post faster time, like whoever posts the fastest time should be
Right.
there.
And I mean, yes, it's not just because like that does happen where like if you post faster, I'm sure there's like discrimination of like and like misogyny, whatever that happens. But I do think like if someone is fast enough, like that's probably recognized. But I think the problem is, at least what I've like researched about, the problem is that so few women even start like doing karting and stuff because it's
Right.
just seen as such a male thing,
Right.
you know? And that's the problem with a lot of sports in general.
Right.
And it's just like making it easier for people to do that is
Yeah.
kind of the main.
Yeah, because if you're pulling, from 200 women internationally that like maybe have a chance to do it, and then all of a sudden, you get more young girls into it. You're pulling from a class, of 200,000 all of a sudden.
Exactly.
That Drive to Survive show, I still need to see it, but
It's
that was
great.
just the greatest thing they could have done for the American market. Like I remember
Yes,
the
100%.
podcast, like the sports podcast I listened to, I'd listened for probably 4 or 5 years up to that, never talked about F1 once. And that summer it came out, they did 2 or 3 interviews with those guys. I
Yeah.
remember they had Daniel Ricciardo, they had Verstappen, can't remember who else.
Yeah, people hate it. Like in other countries, Drive to
Really?
Survive.
Wow.
Yeah, because they just think it's like creating false narratives as TV does.
Yeah.
But I don't think that they realize how much like viewership it's brought. I didn't know what it was until Drive to Survive.
Yeah.
And it's not like I'm sitting here like, oh, like everything on Drive to Survive is exactly how it is.
Yeah,
like
you
I obviously do
recognize
my
them,
own
play it
like
up.
research and like figure things out. And I think it's just I don't know. People just have a weird view of it. And I get it because they also are pretty invasive. Like
I
they're
get that
everywhere.
too. But it is another like part of sports. Like
Yeah.
They have like Hard Knocks in football.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people who don't even watch football watch Hard Knocks.
Yeah.
It's just a good show.
I think something that people fail to recognize is like that is when you make it to a certain level of sports and stuff, that becomes a part of it.
Yeah.
Like,
absolutely.
yes, obviously you're doing the sport, but like having what's the word? Like public image and things like that is also a huge part of it.
Yeah.
It's not, at the end of the day, it's not just about like racing in the sport. It's also, this is a really weird connection to make, but I think of it in terms of like the Hunger Games, where it's like you could be good at killing people, I guess is what they do, but you also need sponsors and things to be able to get supplies and money and like be able to survive. And that's how it is for sports.
Right.
You know, you need to be well liked in order to get people to invest in you.
Right.
That's just part of it.
Yeah. And that's such a big, you talked about the teams that spend the most for Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull, and they're the best three. I mean, that investment and attracting that investment is directly impacting winning.
Oh yeah. 100%. It's just, it's all about money. I would like it to be about the sport, but it's not. And
I go nuts about this concept because of baseball and the Orioles. Like, we have like the lowest payroll in the sport pretty much every year, and we just got a new owner this year. Who's now one of the richest owners. So
I know that.
Like we're going to start hopefully spending some money and stuff.
So is that why? Like, I think about. I mean, we've slowly increased as a team over the past few years, but like this year we're crushing it. And you think about the money aspect, and it's like at the end of the day, is it the team or is it the money?
It's a balance of both,
I guess. It's so weird.
It's a balance of both. It's like it's kind of a crapshoot, but like you got to put yourself in a position for things to go wrong, almost, if that makes sense. Like you got to go out and spend money to get maybe some like depth guys that I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
Well, I don't.
I just want those to fucking step.
I always think about what's it called, Moneyball. Is that the baseball?
I just read that book like a month ago.
That's a book?
Yeah, it's a great.
I know it's a movie, right?
Yeah, they made the movie because of the book.
Okay, that's a great movie where I didn't realize like they have the whole like analyzing stats and stuff and how like they first started that with baseball, and that's a huge part of it.
Yeah,
is being able to like analyze analytics and things to be able to figure out like who's the most powerful, like who is, and they do the same thing in F1 where they have like so much research going on, and like they have like all their monitors with the information about like how hard are they pushing on the gas, like what
like how quickly their foot comes down and like things like that. Like they probably,
it's crazy. I even think back to when I played soccer and they tried to incorporate having us wear these like bands in order to monitor like our heart rate and like how hard we're working and like how hard we kick the ball and things like that in order to like analyze and like fine tune those things.
Right.
And I always hated it because I was not prepared to do all of that. But if you want to be like the greatest, that's definitely a requirement, I think.
100%.
Is being able to understand those analytics.
Yeah. And that's one of the coolest parts of baseball to me is seeing the development. You see it in Moneyball of analytics and how it's incorporated into the game now. Yeah. And there's some people now that are so analytic. Like there's teams and organizations that are so heavily analytics, and then there's some teams that, aren't. And you have guys that get traded and go between teams that are like, oh my God, these guys are like stuck in 1980 over there. Like, yeah. And there's other teams, in the MLB now where they have like simulated it's a screen and it has the pitcher that you're about to play. Like it can simulate any pitcher's windup and how they throw the ball and like does it and then throw, and then it comes out of like this hole. So it looks almost like you're facing this pitcher you're about to face and see how he winds up and how like his little quirks and stuff.
That's not real.
Yeah. Like so some teams have that, and then other teams are just like still like just chewing tobacco and like spitting it on the ground and like just being like, let's go play ball.
Yeah. Definitely technology has become a huge part of sports in general. And I know this is the funniest. I'll show you after this. There's this one interview question that's like it feels like it's like 10 minutes long, just the question.
Short view back to the past. 30 years ago, Niki Lauda told us, take a drake monkey, place him into the cockpit, and he is able to drive the car. 30 years later, Sebastian told us, I had to start my car like a computer. It's very complicated. And Nico Rosberg said he pressed during the race, I don't remember what race, the wrong button on the wheel. Question for you two both. Is Formula One driving today too complicated with 20 and more buttons on the wheel? Are you too much under effort, under pressure? What are your wishes for the future concerning the technical program during the race? Less buttons, more, or less and more communication with your engineers?
Can I ask you who that question is to? Who do you want to answer it? Who's it to?
He said it's
Oh, sorry. I'll beg your
Nico
pardon.
and myself. So
Sorry.
you didn't listen. Can you repeat the question?
But the basis of the question is a good question where the guy was asking basically, as technology advances, is it harder to operate the cars and things? Has it become like too complicated, you know? And I think as technology advances, you have to sort of adjust to it. And it does a little bit become less about how the sport used to be, but that's how the sport is now, and people need to like accept that, you know?
Yeah. And that's going to be something that can be said till the end of time. The sport isn't
Exactly.
how it used to be. Like, we're talking about how it used to be. Maybe you're thinking of 2000 in your head. Maybe you're thinking of 1980 in your head. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, Dad could be sitting there being like, the sport's not how it used to be. Like, from when I was a kid, and then Grandpa sitting there being like, the sport's not how it used to be. From when I was. It's like
I feel
that's
like-
something that's always going to be said.
I feel like people are always focusing on the past with things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not like appreciating like what is going on now.
They just changed the kickoff rules in the NFL. I'm pissed about it.
But what did it used to be?
It used to be they kicked the ball off from the 25-yard line, and then they moved it up to the 35-yard line so that there was more touchbacks and less like high impact collisions, because the kickoff was deemed one of the most dangerous plays in football. So they're trying to eliminate all these impacts, and they moved the line up so you have less returns. And then now they're like, oh my God, everything's a touchback. There's no returns anymore. What if we do... What the fuck did they just change the
Kickers
kickoff
will
rule?
still kick from the 35 yards. However, the other 10 members of the kicking team will line up at the opposing.
That's what it is. That's what it is. So it used to be you can get like a 30-yard head start, almost like a 10-yard head start. The other guys that aren't kicking the ball and run off. And then they made it you have to be within 5 yards. Even when I played football, they changed that rule.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, you're not getting as long of a running head start to go hit someone.
Yeah.
And then they just changed it now to where the players, except for the kickers, start down there pretty much with each other. And it's like, the reason I'm so upset about it is because it's not like football used to be. Like, when I watch the opening kickoff this year, I'll be like, what even? Like, I don't even know what sport this is. Like, they're playing in football. Like, if you plop someone that died 10 years ago, biggest lover of football down for the first game of football this year, they would be like, what is happening? Like, they would have no idea what's happening. Like, is this American football? Like, they seriously wouldn't know what it is. So that's like, I've honestly been pretty upset about that whole kickoff thing, and because it's just not the same. It doesn't look the same.
I mean,
but
yeah, it's weird because
I gotta get over it, I guess.
I mean, I guess, but that is weird, you know? It's like, because you're so used to they kick it, and then you have like no one's gonna be able to make runs off of that like first kick.
I don't know how it's gonna go. Teams are like talking about not even having their kicker kick it. They're gonna have like a linebacker kick it, so they have more like defenders. It's so weird. But the biggest thing I really hate is that the NFL sold it as they're like, oh, you guys hate all these touchbacks? Like, we'll do this for you. Like, here we go. And it's like, we didn't want you to move in the first place 10 years ago. When you moved it from the 25 to the 35, you created all the touchbacks with your own rule. So they're like touting it as this, like, we fixed this problem you guys hate. It's like, you also created the problem that you fixed.
Yeah.
And I really hate it because I think that this is an intermediary step to eliminating the kickoff entirely. I don't think we're going to have a kickoff in 5 years.
I feel like there's a huge disconnect between the people that run sports and like who is actually playing in them. You know?
Yeah.
I don't know, and I don't know what it is. What about it?
I feel like those people that are making those rules are like doing it at least in the NFL's case, and I guess F1 a lot too, is safety is in mind.
Yeah, safety is in mind, but also I'm like, they feel so out of touch with what the actual issues are. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I feel like that's a very common thing. And I don't understand it because these people probably used to be a part of the sport in some way. So they should understand that, like, you need to go out there and actually talk to people and figure out what the issues are.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, like, sit back and be like, oh, we fixed this problem that wasn't even a problem in the first place.
Yeah, that's definitely the consensus in the NFL is like, you don't like the NFL, the actual league. Is that the feeling in F1 with the FIA?
100%.
People really don't like
I
the
do
FIA.
not like that. I don't know if people, I don't like the FIA.
Right.
I think that, especially the guy who's running it now, I think he just is in it for the money.
Out of touch.
He's out of touch, in it for the money, and he's under investigation right now for fixing a race last year.
Right, he is.
Yeah.
There seems like there's a lot of corruption.
There is
based on our conversation right now.
a huge amount of corruption.
And it seems like
F1.
it's like not even uncovered. You know what I mean? Like it's like,
oh no. And I wanna be like, I wanna figure out what's happening so bad.
Uh-huh.
Part of me wants to be a journalist and do that, like investigative journalism.
Right.
But I'm like, I'm not gonna learn anything that way because people don't talk to journalists, which is why I want to do PR, because then I need to know like what the team is up to in order to know what not to say. I just want to know what's going on. Like,
just want to know what the deal is.
I want to know what they're doing. I'm not going to say anything about it. I just want to know, I want to know truly what is happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
I'm so interested.
Yeah, because you know it's not.
I know it's not what it looks like.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it's not even like normal, like, oh, some people will like give tips to other people. It's like full on like spying on people.
Yeah.
And like selling information and shit. I'm like, what? How is this possible? Like, who started this? Who's controlling it? Does the FIA know? Probably.
Seems like any governing body. That sounded so. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like a governing body that people like love. Like the American government, no. NFL, no. FIA, no.
I think any
homeowners associations, no. Like
any sort of governing, there's going to be problems, and obviously it's because people want to be able to do what they want to do. But there's also, not only is there like people not liking governing bodies, but there is also always corruption in like every governing body.
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Is like, that's why people don't like them, because it's almost impossible to prevent corruption of some sort.
Yeah, because it's honestly, at least my opinion, and I don't know if I'll keep this in, but at least my opinion is like, if you are the one who ends up leading something like that, like you're part of a governing body like that, and you set out being like, this is what I want to do, I want to be a part of this, then you should not be the one doing that.
Right.
Like, it should be someone who doesn't want to do it, honestly.
It should be someone that is appointed against their will, pretty much.
Yeah, because if you have someone who's like set goal is to do that, then that's what creates politicians.
Yeah.
It's all like a power and money thing. That's their motivation. They don't care about, and I'm sure that, and I'm not saying that it's everyone, because there absolutely are people who do care about like who they're working for, what they're doing to try to make things better. But I think a large portion of them are just like, it's a good paying job and it gives me power and like social status, and that's why they do it.
You know what I thought some of the best governing bodies were when I played college club lacrosse. It was the same thing. It was, you had to be appointed,
remember you talking.
You had to be appointed
this
by your teammates for these positions, and it was all just people that were just playing for the love of the game. Like, and even the like conferences that we played in, the people that ran that, like that actually did it as their job and stuff. It just, for whatever reason, I felt like that was always very fair. And I think the central reason behind that was because it was very student run. Like, we as students, we hired a coach, we paid him a salary, but we also could fire him anytime we wanted, which we did actually one year. And I just think giving more of the power to the drivers and to the players is the remedy for some of that.
Sports.
Where are we even going?
A basketball game.
Sports!
And Thank you for having me on. This was fun.
Thank you for joining. This was fun. A nice different view than normal. We're on family vacation.
Yep. We're up in the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Yes, a great place, honestly. Very relaxing. All right. Well.
All right. See you dinner.